I could hardly believe my eyes when I opened the side door to my garage. There she was, Karen Matthews, the infamous HOA president, rummaging through my paint supplies. Her highlighted bob swung wildly as she spun around, phone recording.
"This is a crime scene," she shrieked.
"Paint smells are illegal in this neighborhood." The main garage door had been partially pried open. Several paint cans were tipped over, primer forming puddles on the floor. "Karen, you broke into my garage," I said, pulling out my own phone to record. "You need to leave right now." "I don't need permission to investigate a community hazard," she snapped, pointing dramatically at my half-restored antique dresser. "This whole operation is unauthorized." My hobby was simple: restoring old furniture with low-odor water-based paints, keeping the garage door closed while working. For my neighbors, it was barely noticeable. But Karen, 4 houses down, seemed to take my hobby as a personal affront to her authority. It started with the public accusations. Some residents seemed to think they can operate commercial businesses from their homes. I clarified it was a hobby. Then came the warning letters, citing noxious chemical odors no one else could detect. She escalated to referencing obscure odor ordinances that didn't actually exist. My lawyer neighbor, Michael, confirmed she tried to fine the Johnsons for excessive cooking aromas. She makes up rules to fit her vendetta. Finally, I requested an official HOA inspection. The compliance officer, Greg, checked my setup, shrugged, and said, "Everything looks completely up to code. You're actually taking more precautions than required." Greg's approval infuriated Karen. She started calling my workplace. Then came that Thursday evening when I arrived home early to find her white SUV parked down the street and my garage door forced open. "As HOA president, I have emergency authority to inspect any property," Karen declared, clutching her phone. "These paint fumes could be toxic." "There's no such thing as emergency authority in our bylaws," I replied. "You broke into my property. I'm calling the police." As I stepped outside, dialing 911, several neighbors gathered, curious about the commotion. My next-door neighbor, Lisa, confirmed she saw Karen trying to lift the door. Robert from across the street confirmed he saw Karen approach with what he described as a pry bar, later identified on my doorbell camera as a garden trowel. While we waited, something unexpected happened. The neighbors started comparing notes about Karen's long pattern of invasive behavior. She climbed over my fence to measure my garden gnomes. She used a ladder to look over my privacy fence to check my pool chemicals. A clear pattern of abuse was emerging, and for the first time, Karen's victims were united. When the officers arrived, they quickly interviewed the witnesses and reviewed my doorbell camera footage, which clearly showed Karen using the trowel to force the door. Inside the garage, Karen launched into her defense about official HOA duties. "Ma'am, did you have permission to enter this property?" The female officer asked directly. "I don't need permission. I'm the HOA president." Karen replied with absolute conviction. "Actually, you do need permission," the officer corrected her. "Without it, this is breaking and entering, plus trespassing." Karen continued to protest about illegal paint fumes, but the male officer checked my supplies. "Everything looks above board to me." The female officer took out her handcuffs. "Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest for breaking and entering, trespassing, and property damage." The entire neighborhood watched in stunned silence as Karen, still protesting her authority, was led away. 2 days later, Karen was immediately suspended from her position. The legal consequences were swift. Because she had used a tool to force entry, the charges were elevated to felony level. Karen was suddenly facing up to 2 years in prison and $8,000 in fines. At her arraignment, her attorney managed to negotiate a plea deal: 12 months of probation, a $3,000 fine, mandatory community service, and a restraining order preventing her from coming within 100 feet of my property. She was also required to pay for the damage to the door and the spilled paint. When the verdict was announced, Karen's perfectly composed facade finally cracked completely. "But I was right," she wailed in the courtroom, tears mixing with the fury. "The paint smells are illegal. I'm the president. I make the rules." Her desperate plea for authority was silenced by her attorney hustling her out the door. Karen Matthews, the HOA president, had learned the hard way that when the bylaws are weaponized against the law, the judge always wins.